You ever had a neighbor so inconsiderate they invade your personal space without a second thought? I have. It all started when Mrs. Smith, the new neighbor, kept parking her car in my driveway without asking. After multiple requests, I had to do something I never imagined I'd do: call a tow truck. But what happened next stirred up the entire neighborhood, and I found myself facing unexpected consequences. Come with me to uncover the dramatic outcome of this showdown. Since Mrs. Smith, the new neighbor, moved in next door, everything seemed normal at first. She's a middle-aged woman, probably in her 50s, always friendly and open. Initially, I thought she'd be a good, approachable neighbor, but what I didn't expect was her disrespectful behavior toward my personal space. It all started a few months ago. One day, after a long day at work, I pulled into my driveway only to notice Mrs. Smith's car parked in my spot. At first, I thought it was just a simple mistake. Maybe she parked there temporarily in a rush. But when I got out of my car and looked around, I didn't see any sign of her being home. Was she out somewhere and forgot to move the car? I decided to knock on her door. After a few knocks, she finally opened the door, looking a bit surprised but still smiling. I explained that her car was parked in my driveway and I really needed that space to park my own car. She immediately apologized, saying she had guests over and her driveway was full, so she had temporarily parked there. She added, "I'm sorry, I didn't think it would cause any trouble. I'll move the car right now." Feeling confused and not wanting to make a big deal out of it, I accepted her apology and let it slide. I thought maybe she just didn't realize and wouldn't do it again. But then, it kept happening. The next day, when I got home, I found her car parked in my driveway again. This time, I felt like I couldn't let it go. After a few moments of thinking, I decided to knock on her door again to remind her. "Mrs. Smith, I've told you before, please don't park in my driveway," I said firmly. She just smiled and replied, "Aren't you not parking there right now? It's only parked for a little while. What's the big deal?" Even though I was getting frustrated, I tried to stay calm and explain that I needed my own space and didn't want her parking there anymore. This time she just shrugged and said, "All right, I'll move it, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal." After several instances like this, I started to get irritated. Every time I came home, I had to deal with her car taking up my parking spot. Not only that, but she would sometimes have guests over and I'd see other cars parked in my driveway. I'd tried explaining multiple times that I needed the space for myself, but it seemed like Mrs. Smith had no respect for my request. What frustrated me even more was her attitude. She always justified her actions, treating it like it was no big deal and not worth causing a fuss over. But for me, it wasn't a small thing. This was my private space, and I didn't want anyone encroaching on it without permission. A week after the last reminder, I thought Mrs. Smith had finally understood the issue and wouldn't do it again. But I was wrong. One morning, I woke up early to prepare for an important appointment. As I was getting ready to leave, I noticed her car parked again in my driveway, this time blocking my way completely. I stood there for a moment, unable to believe my eyes. All I wanted was to leave on time, but now her car was preventing me from moving. Since my husband had already left for work, I had to handle this myself. I decided to knock on her door. After several knocks with no response, I started to feel frustrated. I called her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I checked the time. I was running late and I couldn't afford to keep waiting. So, I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I called a towing company. When the tow truck arrived, I felt like I was doing the right thing. They quickly hooked up her car and were about to tow it away. Just then, Mrs. Smith appeared, rushing out of her house with an angry look on her face. She yelled at me and the tow truck driver, "What are you doing? You could have waited a little longer. Why make a big deal out of this?" I calmly responded, "I've asked you multiple times not to park here. I can't keep waiting anymore." She stared at me, her expression shifting from anger to disbelief, and then she started to lash out, calling me petty and saying, "This is not a big deal. You're blowing it way out of proportion." She went on, accusing me of being a control freak and saying that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. I just stood there, silent, watching as they towed her car. I felt like I was standing my ground, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore the way she was looking at me. She started to spread the word to our neighbors, telling them that I was a vindictive control freak. As I stood there, trying to calm myself down, a neighbor walked by and gave me a disapproving look. The tension wasn't just coming from Mrs. Smith anymore, it seemed like it was spreading to the people around me. This made me start to question whether I had made the right decision by calling the tow truck. While I still believed I had the right to demand she not park in my driveway, I couldn't help but wonder if there was a different way to handle this situation without causing such a mess. After the incident with the car being towed, I felt extremely tense and exhausted. I thought I had resolved the issue, but things only got more complicated. The very next day, when I went outside to get the mail, I noticed a few neighbors gathered together, looking at me with judgmental expressions. They didn't say anything, but I could clearly feel the change in their attitudes. Their small talk seemed less friendly than before, and I started hearing whispers about me. Mrs. Smith didn't let this go easily. She started telling everyone in the neighborhood that I was too difficult and liked to cause trouble. She claimed I didn't know how to resolve conflicts like an adult, and that I made things tense over something as small as a car being parked in my driveway. Whenever I went outside or ran into anyone, I felt their eyes on me, as if they were thinking of me as the troublemaker in the neighborhood. Even my husband started feeling uncomfortable about the situation. One evening, when I recounted everything to him, he sighed and said, "Maybe you overdid it. She probably understood by now, but now things have gone too far." I looked at him, feeling a bit disappointed that I wasn't getting his full support. He continued, "There's no need to stir up more drama. Let things calm down and it will be fine." Despite his words, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. Deep down, I still felt that I was right. I had the right to protect my personal space, and Mrs. Smith had clearly crossed a line. But I also realized that things were getting worse. Not just with Mrs. Smith, but with the people around me. I started feeling worn out and wondered if I should just let it go to avoid escalating things further. A few days later, when I was outside watering the plants, Mrs. Smith suddenly appeared. She looked at me coldly, then said, "I already told you, this isn't worth making such a big deal. But it seems like you want everyone to know about our little issue." I looked at her, feeling a mixture of anger and disappointment, but I only replied, "I just wanted some respect. Nothing more." Mrs. Smith stared at me for a moment, then turned and walked away without saying anything else. But I knew that from now on, things between us would never be the same. The neighbors wouldn't easily forget what had happened either. In my heart, I still felt that I was right, but the price I paid for being right was too high. Could I do anything else to restore peace in the neighborhood, or would things only continue to get more tense? After the tense days with Mrs. Smith and the shift in the attitudes of the neighbors, I began to feel a strange, thick tension in the neighborhood. Mrs. Smith continued to spread her version of events to others, making everything more complicated. Every time I went outside, I felt as if I was being watched, even hearing whispers and sensing disapproving glances from the neighbors. The cold stares from them not only made me uncomfortable, but also began to affect my daily life. One day, while I was walking my dog, I ran into a group of 3 neighbors. They stopped, seemingly waiting for me to pass by. One of them, Mrs. Linda, who lived at the end of the street, looked at me and said, rather bitterly, "I hear you really enjoy causing trouble for everyone. That's what everyone is saying." I stopped in my tracks, unable to believe what I was hearing. Her words felt like a stab to the chest, and I could tell I had become the enemy of the entire neighborhood. I tried to stay calm and replied, "I just want to keep my personal space. There's nothing to cause trouble over." However, in their eyes, I saw nothing but contempt. Mrs. Linda didn't respond, but simply shook her head and walked away. That feeling was unbearable. I never thought it would escalate like this. All I wanted was a peaceful space and not to be invaded, but now I felt like I was standing alone against everyone. When I got home, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. I realized that despite my efforts to protect my rights, I was damaging my relationships with those around me. Even my husband started to get worried. He said, "You see, people are starting to talk about you now. Is this really how you want it to go? I didn't know how to respond. The feeling of being isolated in my own neighborhood was uncomfortable, but I couldn't just back down from what had happened. That evening, I decided I needed to confront Mrs. Smith one more time. I couldn't let her continue to turn everyone against me without a clear reason. I went to her house, knocked on the door, and waited. When she opened the door, I looked her in the eye and said, "You've been telling everyone that I'm causing trouble. I just want to know why you're doing this." Mrs. Smith stared at me for a moment before answering coldly, "You've made everything a mess. I'm just telling the truth." Her response made it impossible for me to keep being patient. I felt myself becoming more assertive because I knew that if I continued to back down, I'd never get the respect I deserved from her. However, I couldn't stop worrying about what might happen next. Would I be able to restore peace in this neighborhood, or would things only continue to escalate and get worse? After the tense meeting with Mrs. Smith, I couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. Even though I had made my stance clear, it felt like things were only getting worse. Her words still echoed in my mind. I'm just telling the truth. And even as I tried to stay calm, I felt a great injustice weighing on me. It seemed like everyone in the neighborhood had turned their backs on me, and I had to face disapproving stares from them every time I went outside. The situation got worse when one afternoon, while I was working in the garden, I saw Mrs. Smith standing across the street, staring at me. Her eyes were sharp, and I felt like I was the target in a game I wasn't even a part of. I tried to ignore her, but that gaze made it impossible to focus on my work. Even though I tried to stay away, I couldn't ignore the rumors she was still spreading. The next day, when I was at the grocery store, a former neighbor approached me. She looked at me sympathetically and said, "I've heard people talking about you and Mrs. Smith. You should know that in this neighborhood, everyone values peace. Things like this won't be forgiven." That warning hit me like a shock, making me feel completely isolated. It seemed like no one was on my side, and I began to wonder if I had done the right thing by standing my ground. The frustration began to build up, and I could no longer stand it. I decided I needed to confront Mrs. Smith again, not just to resolve the parking issue, but to regain respect from her and those around me. I knew that if I didn't take action, I would be seen as weak, and this would never end. I texted Mrs. Smith, asking to meet for a serious discussion. A few hours later, she replied, saying she'd meet me the following afternoon. I didn't know what to expect, but at least I felt like I could handle the situation directly and no longer let anger control me. The next day, when Mrs. Smith arrived at my house, the atmosphere between us was heavy. I started the conversation by saying that I didn't want this issue to escalate any further and ruin our relationship with the neighbors. I asked her to stop spreading false information and made it clear that I wasn't trying to cause trouble, just protect my personal space. Mrs. Smith listened for a moment, then laughed dismissively. "You're so stubborn," she said, "but maybe I'll let this go." Although she didn't say anything more, I felt a partial sense of relief, but I wasn't entirely at ease. Was this really the end? Or was it just a temporary pause before things escalated again? It felt like I was standing on a thin line, and I wasn't sure if I could keep this peace for long.